Welcome to the Real Life Moms podcast, where we put ourselves at the top of our to-do list. I'm Lisa Foster, your host, and today I'm here with fellow mom, psychotherapist, author, interfaith minister, and thought leader, Nancy Colier. And today we are going to explore how to get unstuck from our stories that keep us stuck in life. So I'm really excited about this topic. Hi, Nancy. Welcome to the show.
Delighted to be here.
I'm excited to have you here. I know our topic kind of stems off some of this theme of your new book that's going to be coming out. You have multiple
Mhm.
books, but this one is Narratives Let Go of the Stories That Keep You Stuck. So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about this upcoming book and kind of what inspired you to write it.
So the new book was inspired by being a human being and 32 years of being a therapist and seeing people create their own reality and stick with that reality despite what real life is showing them and continue over and over again to recreate it and then be frustrated and self critical about the fact that they couldn't change their life. But watching many folks in my life, which is human nature, tell themselves a story about themselves and then act it out. And it just over and over again would shock me about how what would be presented to the person very clearly in reality would be overlooked, or tiny pieces of it would be taken forward to prove the underlying story. And yet the underlying story not being seen as a story construction. So I set out to investigate, how does this happen? Why do we stick with the stories that are painful and don't get us where we want to go? Why do we do that? And how can we stop?
Yeah. Okay. Obviously, you're going to know my next question because, like, why do we do that? First of all, maybe explain a little bit underlying stories. What does that actually mean? And then, yeah, why do we stick with this underlying story that sounds like it's kind of running the program of our lives?
Sure. You never have to go far for an example, but yesterday I was sitting at my local diner, which is my eavesdropping spot and often my laboratory for starting new material. And the scene would be, and you couldn't make this stuff up, but uh, packed diner. And the waiter is running around like a lunatic. He's sweating. There was one guy on the floor, and sitting next to me was a man and his companion talking about some movie and so on. And I heard him say to his dining companion, if I were somebody important like the guy in the film, we'd already be eating our burgers. It's because I'm a nobody
Hmm.
that he hadn't come over and taken the order. And that's a little tiny story. A couple weeks ago, I met up with a friend. I was 10 minutes late because I had to rush my daughter to the doctor. And she said, I can't count on anyone anyway, so it really matter. We walk around with these stories. We do it with our partners. He's like this, she's like that. And we lock ourselves up in these prisons so often about ourselves. I'm the kind of person that has this happen to them. And often, even bad therapy kind of locks that in. This happened to me, so this is what can happen to me.
Yeah.
And what we don't realize is that because we believe that about ourselves, we then act a certain way.
Mm.
Thinking of one client I have who believes that she is unlovable. So she goes out in the world and behaves in a way that's very hard to love. And then she's found her proof. Everyone rejects it. So this is what we're doing constantly, and we're not aware. That guy sitting next to me yesterday is telling himself the story, he's not important. right? He's not a player. He's not whatever he's telling himself. And then he gets resentful, gives the waiter a mouthful of resentment, and reinforces this idea of himself as a nobody. And so our stories are ways that we essentially say what is happening in reality, and then we say why it's happening in reality. Client says to me last month, it's raining because it's the only day off I've had in months. Yes, of course, the universe is out to punish you. There it is. So we write the meaning into everything, and then we live it out. And lots of folks feel stuck in their lives. They feel like, why does my life feel like Groundhog's Day? Because we're creating the circumstances for that same self-experience to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so the person that's sitting there in the restaurant that's, I'm not important, that's why you're not taking my order. Where did that start? Where do these stories begin?
So this is part of why they stick around, in part because we've lived this pain. This pain doesn't come out of nowhere. So it's not about just dismissing it. That man undoubtedly has had that experience of feeling unimportant, maybe young, probably young, and then continued to reinforce it. Our minds are like, they're like heat-seeking missiles. They go looking for the evidence they need to support the underlying story. So either we go out and find the little morsel of that amidst many other possibilities of experiences, that's selective paying attention, or we might have to actually create it. You might have to distort what's happening, and I see that all the time. But we certainly write the explanation. We connect the dots between the busy waiter who doesn't come over and my lack of importance. We create the dots. So what we do is we do that, and then we have all this proof for that, let's say the young experience, right? And what I help people do is separate this busy life situation is bringing up that earlier feeling, and it matters. It's not healed. Otherwise, it wouldn't keep repeating. But I don't need to believe that's what's actually the truth here. So I have to get my storyline off reality, while I also acknowledge in me there's a wound that feels like a nobody. But what happens is we keep acting it out and reproving it to ourselves and trying to make it go another way, which doesn't heal the underlying suffering. Does that make
Yeah,
sense? Yeah.
totally. Yeah. First, what I'm hearing a little bit is like when you're in that situation, like this waiter isn't, we're just using this example, right? But
Yeah,
this
yeah,
waiter
run with
isn't
it.
coming to me. I must be unimportant. I'm not that guy in the movie. Like I would almost imagine you would say, okay, let's pause and ask yourself, is this really true in this situation? Or is
Right?
that waiter really busy because every table is full, right? And they just haven't
Exactly.
had the opportunity. I'm sure that waiter is having its own story going on. I can't handle this, right?
Yeah. I'm not enough.
I'm
I'm
not
not enough.
enough. That's their story. Look at all these stories, right? But that might be a way of just noticing. But how do we start to heal so we're not taking our story to every situation? I'm not important. I'm not important, right?
Well,
How do we rewrite this?
we have to be the golden ticket here is awareness. When we start paying attention to what's the story I'm telling myself and really listen for that, right? As we get better at that, hearing that what makes self stories so difficult, stories about our partners and everyone else we ever, they're like this, or whatever it might be, or stories about the world goes like this, nothing good happens, or there's good and bad, or all these stories we carry. What starts to happen is when they're formed young, they're like a pair of glasses through which we look. They're the lenses in our eyes. So we've already accepted them as truth. So they don't show up in our mind like obsessive thoughts like, where am I going to go on vacation? Or what's for dinner? Or what's my grocery? They don't come like that. They're built in. So we have to do a little more work there where we actually insert on a regular basis the question, what's the truth I'm assuming is true? What's the story I'm telling myself? What are the dots I'm connecting? Okay? What interpretation of reality am I making? So right there, our friend next to me, just, well, I could be that guy. He's going to start to pay attention to what's the story I'm telling myself? And what am I really afraid of here if I'm inadequate or I'm not important or whatever it is? What is the story I keep telling myself about myself?
Hmm.
But we get way more adept once we start to introduce it is at catching the underlying story that's built into the lens. What's
Hmm.
the truth I'm assuming? And over time, we get really good at letting the thing be the thing. The guy is busy, I'm here. And taking our overlay off of reality. But what we develop is a greater awareness of what are the links I'm making? What's the meaning here? I'm self-writing.
Yeah. And as you're talking, I'm wondering how much of this underlying story, thought, whatever, is attached to an emotion about ourselves, maybe, whether it's
Yeah.
fear or whatever, guilt or anything like that. And how do you feel the emotion attached to it makes it even harder to move forward in your story?
Yeah, because there's this pain, right? We're trying to reenact it to make it go another way because it's painful. What we act out generally is not something we want.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, over and over again. Sometimes it will be. I've seen self stories where even if reality keeps presenting failure, the person, that's part of what is so powerful is stories can also preserve our self-esteem. I'm this despite the fact that you don't get that job ever, right? And then all their defense systems. So
Right.
whether they're defending a young wound or they're defending a self-esteem, right? That we rewrite the story. We call it reframing, but we're
Hmm.
basically rewriting the story. What I encourage folks to do is not just slap a positive story on
Yeah.
a negative story. It doesn't work. And when the going gets tough, it's like putting a hat on dirty hair. It doesn't work. But it's to see the story making and to separate that wound or that fear that I will be a nobody is there. That fear that I'm a failure. So I keep telling myself, I'm a success, they don't get it. I'm a genius ahead of my time, whatever news story we come up with. It really attempts to cover this underlying fear, as you're saying, or hurt, or whatever it is. So we have to go there. It doesn't mean that we don't use reframing. Stories are how we make sense of the world. We need stories, right? We need to make sense of things. We're floating on a planet in the middle of a Milky Way. We come and go. We create a cohesive storyline so that we can bear the uncertainty.
Yeah.
And we create, oh, I know this, I know that. Knowing is our ground, and it's how we make meaning, it's how we create a place for ourselves in the cosmic order. We need stories, narratives, so that we're not disappearing all the time into this sort of what I call a vertical now, where there's only this moment. So we create a timeline, a storyline, and that includes ourselves.
Yeah. How important do you feel like you need to heal that underlying, let's call it, can we call it a wound? I don't know.
Yeah.
before being able to move on. Because I agree, I love the dirty hat thing. That's a brilliant way. But the hat
Yeah,
over dirty hair, that's brilliant because I do think a lot of people, in order to change their mindset, they think positive or to kind of do the shift. And it's helpful, but what I find sometimes it doesn't stick. Right? Something
yeah,
comes along and hits us really hard, or something like you fall back out of it. Oh, I got to think positive again. Okay, let me get back on the track. Right?
exactly.
So,
Yeah. Tell
is it,
myself I love myself,
yeah.
right? Listen, if we're going to pick a story, pick a good one. I am all for it. But we have to address, where did this story come from? Where did this fear come from? And separate all the thinking and all the one of the books that I wrote that has been a bestseller is called Can't Stop Thinking. And it's about obsessive thinking. And one of the things I talk about in that book is about how we start to notice that the thoughts and all the thoughts and all the stories and all of the mind machinations, mind mental gymnastics are about trying to stay away from some deep hurt. And so it's not to say that we don't use those, but we notice them, and we have to be able to get okay with not okay inside ourselves. So we have to attend to what all the stories are trying to keep us from feeling. Yes. It doesn't mean that at the same time, we're not also dropping the stories, right? We can also drop the self stories because we waste our lives lost in the stories that keep us stuck, and go to the initial source, keep it separate. That's the problem. We get identified with I'm a nobody or I'm a somebody or whatever it might be. And then we believe that's the truth. And the underlying hurt, fear, whatever it might be, it gets collapsed into that, never gets attended to. Yeah. So
Yeah.
you're spot on there that at some point that has to become its own entity that is deserving of our kindness and attention. And
Yeah.
understanding, where did it start? Who taught me that? What were the experiences that led me to feel that way about myself? Now I've had hundreds since that I'm using to say that made me feel. Those were self-constructed. But what was the initial gunshot? Or who in whose company did I really feel that way? And that's almost always young.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is why sometimes it's so hard to get
Yeah.
to, right? Because it's kind of stuff back there in our minds and it's not really at the forefront. It's just a trigger. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why core beliefs are so tricky, because the stories arise out of core beliefs, and core beliefs are in our corneas. And so we have to get our corneas out in front of us, which
Mm-hmm.
is a kind of a strange thing to say. But when we see how much pain that story is causing us, because what it's reinforcing was the initial pain, right? We see it's not working. There's something where we can identify there, well, this is not working for me, and it's
Mm-hmm.
causing more pain. So once we can see that, we're starting to get behind, there's an awareness of the one who's believing the core belief. We're moving the layers backwards. And what am I believing is a question that I am continually encouraging people to ask. What am I believing right now? And
Yeah.
what of that is actually happening here? When did it happen? And really trying to get more aware
Yeah.
of your own. We're all walking around inside our own private cinemas in our head, and we're all playing a different movie. We're all watching a different movie, and we're all believing, here's where it gets tricky though, that movie is reality. So I'm trying to help people get aware of the movie that's playing in their head that has them forever cast as the same character. And even in relationships, because I work with a lot of not just individuals, but couples, we'll often have a situation where someone has cast their partner as a particular role in their movie. You're the one who does this to me. Let's say in My Dining Neighbor, maybe his wife is the one that invisibilizes him or doesn't listen to his opinion, whatever projection he's got going on. And there sometimes comes a time in certain couples where it's heartbreaking, but also liberating. One partner says, I'm not interested in being the character in your movie anymore. If it doesn't budge, if the person can't see that they're projecting, they've cast their partner as a character who's now doing that self story to them. It's
And I
very
think,
common.
yeah, it's so interesting because I think when you do that, even to someone else, they start playing that character, even if it wasn't them in the
Yep.
first place, right? They just start conforming a little bit.
And also, there's something really remarkable that happens there, Lisa, which is that over time, if awareness is not brought to it, that this is their story projected onto you, what starts to happen is that other partner starts to feel guilty for being the characteristics that they've been now cast as, or they start living defensively to show that they're not that character.
Yeah.
And then your life often gets smaller and smaller because all of that is defensive related. Right? That wasn't you to begin with. But we really have to get better in our culture at hearing and seeing our stories in action. Right? What am I believing right now? What meaning am I making? What dots am I connecting? How am I inserting a why this is happening that is purely of my own construction, my conditioning, my wounds, my distortions, so on and so on. And then how do I get this overlay off of reality and take someone at their word? What if my friend was telling me the other day that she gave another woman we know a present, and that when she received it, she had some funny face on. And my friend said, I'm sure she thinks I'm cheap. And my first thought was, maybe she's having dental work. I don't know. So let the thing be the thing. And if we don't know something, to open up the possibility of more honest communication in the sense of, hey, I know where my crazy mind goes when you make that face, but I just want to clear that because I'll write a story that it's not a good enough gift. And then let the person tell us the truth, not we insert it and then assume it's the truth.
So true. Yeah, I'll see that in my own house too. I'll say something and then the person's body language changes and you're like, oh, I must have hurt you
Yeah.
in a way or whatever.
Yeah.
And then when I'll say something, it's like, they're like, no, that's actually not what I was thinking at all. And I'm like, huh, it could really affect this. You're creating a whole story.
99% of communication is everyone in their own private cinema and then reacting as if that is one of my closest friends. Heartbreakingly, that happened, and she was living something about me. Now, it was extraordinarily out of character what she was assuming. And by the time I realized it, because it came from her, it was too late to correct. And the friendship was lost because 6 months before she had assumed something about me that wasn't true, had nothing to do with me. And we could never recover. A lot of these stories go on in the dark. And what I so wish in that case, she had the awareness to come and say, that's what I'm believing happened. And we don't communicate that way. But what's so remarkable is when we start communicating that way and give other people the dignity of telling us their truth, not assigning it to them, right? We really enter a different level of intimacy. And that's what I'm always encouraging couples to do, is not be listening to whether I agree with what their opinion is, but can I know them? Can I be curious about what's true for them without having to agree, without having to have it feel good to my ego,
Mm.
just to listen in this different way, which is let them have a truth that I don't control.
Yeah. Let them have their own movie, right? That's okay.
Exactly.
They can have their own movie.
Exactly.
We can
I
like
don't need
both.
to even
Yeah.
like their movie.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah, good. If I really love them, I
Mm.
want to know what's true. I don't want to
Yeah.
just know what fills my holes. It's
Yeah.
such a different way of relating. It's two separate entities. And oh, look at that. Oh, for you, it's like that. It's not how we relate. We
Yeah.
relate really where we're so identified with our thoughts and opinions and stories and all of this that if someone has a radically different experience or truth, we feel annihilated. We feel like yours can't be true and mine true. Actually, they can,
Yeah.
because they're all movies.
Yeah. I love that.
Both and. Both and. Huh.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so refreshing. Yeah. They both can be true. Neither is wrong. That's
Yeah.
great.
We've been conditioned with our cultural narratives to believe in a right and wrong, good
Yeah.
and bad, very dualistic. So when you open to this both and, it's and not but. It's and.
Mm.
You ever know folks in yudders? I call them yudders. They go, yes, but. Which never feels very good. But why not your experience and mine?
Yeah. I love that. That's actually what I needed to hear today,
Ah,
which is
good.
interesting. It always happens, right? Whoever I talk to,
It's
it's like the thing
yes.
I needed to hear today. So thank
I think there's a force that pulls us towards what's needed.
So, what are some steps, like a mom that's feeling stuck right now in her story and maybe her family
Mm-hmm.
story and friends' stories? What's a few steps they can start taking?
Always awareness, right? Start to insert these self inquiries, right? Contemplations, what we take to be for granted and what we take as a given. Question them. Take a walk and say, what am I believing is true? What did I come into this situation already believing? And just making it so nothing else could happen. What's the story I'm telling myself now? And what is the story about myself ultimately that I'm telling myself? So, and if that's true, what about that makes that so scary or painful? Or if that were to be true, then what? So get curious about your own leaps and bounds. And when you start to connect, this happened because, let because be one of those big red flags. Catch it. So now we're entering La La Land. Not that it's not true necessarily, but let's get curious. How am I knowing what I'm knowing? Here are the bare bones of reality. I encourage moms that feel stuck to say, where am I telling myself a story about myself, about another person, about my life? And entering with that belief already. And then how can I let life be what it is and get my story out of it? It's almost like if you were to show up from another planet, you have no history to drag around with you. You have no future that you need to prove about yourself. And you're just showing up in this present moment. No story. Let the thing be the thing.
Yeah.
It's a really utterly different way, paradigm shift of all. So I encourage people, ask questions of your mind. What am I assuming? And then also always self-compassion. There's no recipe that doesn't include that what's the hurt under this? So some little part of me did feel like a nobody, right? Can we bring that in and attend to that in a different way than recreating it and proving it wrong this time? How can I bring some wisdom, some compassion, some understanding to that experience, which is
Yeah, I love that. And I am going to work on that. I like the visualization of being dropped in from another place
you don't have
other
to
than Earth.
carry you around with a big luggage set, right?
Yeah,
This
and just kind of showing up right there without all the stories following me and all the worries following. Yeah, it sounds like just relaxing and being present and
yes,
wonderful. Although hard because the chatter in our minds is sometimes really strong.
yes,
Yeah.
that is the practice. And the third tip, just before we finish, is give people the dignity of telling you their truth
Yeah.
always. And you'll see your relationships radically change when you do that. You don't know another person's truth like they don't know yours. And wow, when you have a friend that says, I didn't know you felt that way, my goodness, does a relationship deepen? My goodness.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Where can the listeners find you, find your books and all that you offer?
Sure. Yeah. All that yummy social media. So nancycolier.com, COL, one L. We never knew why, but um, and my books are at Amazon and everywhere books are sold, booksellers. If they're not there, I have them ordered, but they're everywhere. I write a column for Psychology Today called Inviting a Monkey to Tea. And I have a Substack, big following, and I give workshops all over the country. So look on my website. And the new book comes out November 1st. And it is really, we're looking in the wrong direction. We're looking outward for why we're stuck. We're really stuck because of what's happening inside our own mind.
Yeah. Great. I'll have that all in the show notes so people could just click on the links and find you easily. And thank you so much for coming today. This was enlightening, of course, and a new perspective. And I'm excited to write my new narrative.
Beautiful. And it'll be a lovely hat, but the awareness that can see all the hats, that's really our freedom. So it's been a delight to talk with you. And I look forward to hearing the progress of both and.
Thank you.
You're so welcome.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. It was so nice to talk to Nancy today. If you're interested in learning more about what she does and all that she offers, just click on the link in the show notes. And until next week, keep carving out time for yourself and keep putting yourself on top of your to do list.